It's known as the Mini Tour de France. Every spring for the past 75 years, the international peloton has rendezvoused in the Ardennes region to tackle 3 stages of cycling in 2 days. It's a unique concept which balances every aspect of the sport of cycling. A flat stage, a mountain stage and an individual time trial. Last year, after winning Paris-Nice, an amazing effort by Bobby Julich awarded the American with back-to-back wins in France.
Julich knows how to rise to the occasions. He doesn't feel the pressure, and he's going to get himself the win. He's on fire, and he has been since Paris-Nice.
This year, another American has the form of his life. After winning the Tour of California, Floyd Landis climbed to the win in this year's Paris-Nice, making him the man to beat. But yesterday on stage 1, Eric Decker made the first statement on the race's opening flat stage. How will the rest of the race unfold? Cyclism Sunday's coverage of the 75th edition of the Criterium International is next on OLN. Well, the riders of the international peloton for the last 2 weekends have enjoyed the French Riviera and the Italian Riviera, but now they've moved a little bit further up to the north. And with that travel up to the north, the weather has changed quite dramatically. Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Sherwen, joined by Bob Rowland. Yes, the weather is not that clement this afternoon for the riders of the Criterium International, but it's an interesting concept, this race, because it brings together all the different facets of the sport in just 2 days of racing. A flat stage for the sprinters, a climber's stage, and of course the individual time trial for the specialists. And Bob, that is a unique thing, I have to say, about the Criterium International. And of course, for the first time during the year, it's our first chance to see how the Tour de France contenders are.
It's a very tough weekend of racing, 3 stages in just a couple of days. The first stage is about 187 kilometers. The total distance for the 3 stages, 300 kilometers. Sedan to Charleville-Mézières, flat stage. Then Le Villefort to Monterme, a lot of climbs on that. And then where the GC is generally played out in the time trial, around the streets of Charleville-Mézières.
Well, 3 stages, as I've said, over 2 days of racing, 301 kilometres or 187 miles. So that's roughly the same as the distance between San Francisco and Fresno in California. 1 flat stage, 1 hilly stage and 1 individual time trial. There are 21 teams on the start line, 14 pro teams, 7 continental pro teams and 178 riders. But I have to say, Bob, we've talked a lot over the last couple of days about riders who are going to be favourites for this event. And I have to say, you've got to talk Team CSC at the start of the season. Last year, the winner of this race was Bobby Julich. He also won the final time trial as well. He's told us this season that he actually has delayed his preparation because he wants to ride better towards the end of the season. But you can't discount a man who can win the prologue of Paris-Nice. You can't discount Jens Voigt either. He's a winner of the Criterium International on 2 occasions. And he's always good at the start of the season. And this is the team, I have to say, who are bound to be aggressive over the whole of this weekend of racing. But, Bob, you've got to talk also about the Americans.
Floyd Landis has won Tour of California and Paris-Nice in successive races for the Phonak rider. Floyd having a great start to the season. He's got to be the pre-race favorite of this event. He's on fantastic form and just doing a great job for his sponsor, Phonak, so far this year. Also, Thomas Dekker, he just won down in Italy in the Tirreno Adriatico. He won a stage here last year. He's one of the young and up-and-coming stars of international cycling from the Rabobank squad. Watch for Thomas Dekker to try to add another win to his Palmares. He's a good time trialist and a strong climber.
Well, let's remind ourselves what happened on yesterday's stage. The first stage of the Criterium International, 192 kilometres, was dominated initially by a 30-man breakaway. But coming into the end of town, there were 4 men left. Igor Astroloa went down very hard indeed, leaving just 3 men at the front to battle out for the victory. And it was the orange jersey. It wasn't Thomas Dekker, as we were expecting. It was Eric Dekker, the old statesman from Holland, who got the better in the acceleration up to the line, just ahead of Ivan Basso. Good to see that name very early on in the season. Basso was there in 2nd place and Andrei Grivko in 3rd, just 2 seconds arrears. But that gave the first yellow jersey of the race here to Eric Dekker. And I have to say, Bob, he was looking very excited on the podium there. He leads there, as you can see, same time as Ivan Basso, Grivko in third place, Jose Ivan Gutierrez down there in fourth, and Peter Weening of Team Rabobank up there in fifth place. And taking a look a little bit further down, Constantino Zabaya was sixth, Ronnie Schultz seventh, Jens Voigt a little bit further down for him in 17th, and Floyd Landis involved in a crash out on the course, a lowly 44th place. Well, stage 2 is going to be a lot more interesting. This is the Course de Côte, the race of the hills. Starts at La Vieille Forge and goes to Monte Terme.
Here's a look at the profile. You can see how hilly this stage is, a bit like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, a classic of incredible climbs and difficulty. The highest point of the race, La Roque de Tour climb, and a climb to the finish line.
And here's some information about the stage. You can see the race is 101 kilometres or 63 miles. The highest climb out on the course is the Roque La Tour, and it's a 3-kilometre climb or 2 miles, a 10% gradient. And last year's winner of the stage, the very young man from Holland, Thomas Dekker. Well, as we go straight down to the action of this morning's mountain stage, the riders facing up to the 101-kilometre stage. And I have to say the action started very quickly early on, but it was really down towards the end on the penultimate climb of the stage that the action really started to fly. Well, looking here, Bob, in the green jersey, you can see that's Ivan Basso, the yellow jersey very comfortably on the shoulders of Eric Dekker. Dekker has to be one of the elder statesmen, doesn't he, of Dutch cycling?
He's had an incredible career so far, winning lots of the big races in Europe. He had a big setback a few years ago in Milan-San Remo where he broke his femur right next to his hips, and it's been a long time for him to come back to the top of the sport. But he won the first stage, and that was a great win for Eric Dekker. A bit of a comeback. Thomas Dekker, his teammate, won Tirreno Adriatico last week, and Rabobank continuing to carry through with that success with Eric Dekker, not related, but he's leading the Criterium International up until this point, and there it looks like perhaps a bit of a breakaway there at the front. You can see how tough the tempo has been. CSC on the front, setting the tempo. Basso and Dekker on the wheel, though, and that looks like a little attack by Eric Dekker.
Eric Dekker on fire here at the start of the season. The early part of the race, by the way, was dominated by 2 breakaways, one of David Lopez Garcia and one of Alberto Contador, but they never got themselves more than a 1-minute advantage over the front end of the main field. And I have to say the majority of the work has been done by Team Rabobank. We're here on the penultimate climb of the day. This is the climb of the Côte de Montmalgré-2. The summit is at 81 kilometres covered, therefore 20 kilometres to go to the finish. And you can see the green jersey there. Every time there's a move, Ivan Basso is right up there. I'm a bit surprised, Bob, because I would have thought it was going to be Jens Voigt or it was going to be Bobby Julich in a race like this, but it's the man who finished second overall in the Tour de France last year on the front of what is looking like a very serious breakaway going clear, because now we can see the big names moving to the front here at the Criterium International. And I would have to say I think this group is about 10 riders strong with all of the big names present. Also coming up on today's Cyclism, we'll take a look at one of the top teams on the road, Team CSC. Plus we'll give you the latest updates from the Americans as they prepare for this year's Tour de France. And later on, the finale of Stage 3 individual time trial, which will decide the outcome of this year's Criterium International.
Cyclism Sunday's coverage of the Criterium International on OLN is brought to you by John Hancock Investments and Insurance.
Welcome back to Cyclism Sundays here on OLN for our coverage of Stage 2 of the Criterium International. Well, actually, it was at this race last year that Bobby Julich really caught on fire, taking the overall win for the second time in his career. But Bobby Julich's career has really been a fairly amazing one.
It has been a great career for Bobby Julich. He had some lean years on French squads, but a couple of years ago he joined the Danish team CSC, coached by Bjarne Riis, and he's had a real resurgence as a bike racer, winning both Criterium International and Paris-Nice last year. And of course, we can't forget the bronze medal he won in the Olympic time trial in 2004.
And let's not forget either, back in 1998, he also finished third overall in the Tour de France, where we caught up with Bobby Julich and asked him what goals has he got left in his career to try and accomplish.
I would like to win a stage in the Tour de France still. I would like to win the national championship jersey. And of course, to have the leader's jersey even for a day in the Tour de France or the Giro. Those are my 4 remaining goals for my last few years of my career. This season is a little special because I do the Tour of Italy and the Tour de France in support of our team leader, Ivan Basso. So a lot of that kind of depends on how the race goes. Obviously, like I said, I would love to, maybe get a chance at taking a jersey, and a leader's jersey in the Giro. I think the Tour de France will be a lot more difficult, but that remains a goal. And then this year, I would like to try to do the national championships towards the end of the season, because I know they moved it a little bit later, so maybe I'll be back in the States for that.
There's no doubt Bobby Julik's still got a lot of power in that engine. We may well yet see him wear the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, or even garner the American National Championships. Ivan Basso here, looking like a very strong man. The little twitch of the arm says, come on guys, we're just going over the summit of the Côte de Malgré-Tout, and we've got a very good chance here of opening up the gap. This is Botcharov, the Russian rider on Crédit Agricole, and he too now realizes this is a deciding moment. We're inside of 20 kilometers to go, and this leading group, Bob, has around about 25 seconds over the rest of the main field, and we're almost a minute back to the rest of the riders.
This is good riding by Ivan Basso, the leader of Team CSC, in the green jersey, because he's on second on GC at the start of the stage, not leading the points probably at the end of the competition. But Ivan Basso still riding well on these climbs here on stage number 2 of Criterium International.
And look at these weather conditions. This is not the French or Italian Riviera, is it? We're right up on the Belgian-German border. The clouds here are going to make it very difficult for us to get pictures up and down to the finishing line, but the action is certainly on the road, because this is the classification at the top of the climb. Botcharov getting himself maximum points there ahead of Basso and Decker. Decker just hanging on the back, and in fact, as we speak, this is a leading group of 4 riders starting to move clear from the rest. Looking a bit further back, Bob, it really is rather difficult. That's Frank Schleck there, the rider wearing the jersey of national champion of Luxembourg, and I don't think he'll do too much to chase everybody down. This will be Brad McGee a little bit further back. He's been caught out. Let's not forget, Brad McGee is probably the most serious man to lose out here. In fact, this is Joly and Kim Kirken riding in the new colours of T-Mobile, and that's a bit of a surprise because he was one of my pre-race favourites.
Kim Kirchen being dropped there on the second to last climb. Incredible tempo being set by the riders in the front, including the race leader, Eric Decker, the Dutchman on the Rabobank squad. On his wheel is Ivan Basso, the leader of Team CSC. Second place on GC, that's why he's wearing the green jersey there. And he might like to reverse those standings with Eric Decker there. Eric Decker is having a great ride here so far in Criterium International.
Well, the way Decker's going here, I don't think there's going to be any reversal at all. Let's not forget there's an 8.3 kilometre individual time trial this afternoon, and that is where the race will certainly be decided. Rather sad, because the man we expected to ride well here, in fact, Floyd Landis, was in that leading breakaway yesterday, Bob, of 30 riders, but he crashed and went down very hard. Trailed in more than 1.5 minutes in arrears, and in fact we are hearing that he has in fact just abandoned the race, so he won't be finishing and going forward to participate in the time trial this afternoon. And of course another pre-race favourite, Thomas Decker, in great form, one of the great Decker trio, we have to say, none of them related, has in fact also not started the stage.
Here's our leaders, Decker, Basso, Botcharov, all still there in the front. They're being chased by a group just behind them, including the teammate of Ivan Basso, that's Frank Schleck in the champion of Luxembourg's jersey.
Well, you can see now we're looking at the leading group of 4 riders. They're being chased by another 4 riders at just 10 seconds, and then there's a group at 23 seconds. But this is a very difficult part of the course. We've gone over the summit of the Côte de Malgré-Tout. There's one climb to go to the summit of the Col de Monterme, and that's the final climb of the day. But this is a very long, hard, false flat these riders are tackling here. And welcome back to Stage 2's coverage here of the 75th edition of the Criterium International. But with spring upon us, it's the Belgian Classics next. And next week, OLN will be at the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the Tour of Flanders.
The Tour of Flanders, the toughest one-day race in the world, discounting Paris-Roubaix perhaps, all the cobbled climbs. And cycling reaches a fevered pitch while Tom Boone, the current world champion, tries to defend the title he won here last year, chased perhaps by George Hincapie, the American on the Discovery Channel cycling team.
Next Sunday, OLN's in Belgium for the Tour of Flanders, famous for its steep cobblestone hills. Don't miss one of the toughest and most prestigious races in the world. Cyclism Sundays on OLN, next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific. Well, this is the chase group we're looking at here. Frank Schleck is in there from Luxembourg and Team CSC. Caruso is in here from Liberty Seguros. Alberto Contador, who's also ridden very well in the early part of the stage.
and a man who I think is having a very good start to this season, Bob, in the red jersey there, Igor Astroloa.
Igor Astroloa has been right up there in the front in many of the races so far this year, including Milan-San Remo, in the breakaways that almost succeeded on the Via Roma in San Remo just 1 week ago. And he was also quite good in the in Tirreno Adriatico, where he got second on the stage behind his countryman Oscar Freire and also another former world champion.
Well, this is Sébastien Joly. He's in the second chase group on the road at around about 28 seconds. The chasing group number 2 is made up of 4 riders. Frank Schleck's in there, Grivko is in there as well, the new Russian rider who is turning out to be quite a revelation. And of course, Igor Astroloa. Botcherov on the frontier, the Russian rider. He rode for many seasons on the AG2R team before moving across here to Crédit Agricole, and he's looking very aggressive. Just getting himself on the back there, Juan Carlos Dominguez representing Team Phonak. In fact, Team Unibet, the jerseys are very confusing this season because this Unibet jersey, Bob, looks very much like the Phonak colours.
It's almost identical to the Phonak team. Makes it a little bit more difficult for the commentators. But for the riders, they got to wear what the sponsors provide them. Bacharov having a good stage so far, doing his part in the tempo making with 2 of the big stars of the sport. That man right there in the leader's jersey, Eric Decker, as well as one man we think might be the next rider to win the Tour de France in July, and that's Ivan Basso. Team CSC struggling a little bit so far this season in the results. Pretty meager compared to years past, and Ivan Basso has taken the bull by the horns, taken the reins of the squad, and is going out and trying to have a big result at Criterium International.
Well, this is Sébastien Joly coming across the gap here, and he's going to join the second group on the road, and this is going to be rather a reformation of the race, and getting in there as well is interesting to see this performance here by Kim Kerken. But Bob, I have to say the men at the front are really doing the majority of the damage here. They're hovering at around about 25 seconds, so with a slight descent into the outskirts of the town of Charleville-Mézières, then the little circumnavigation before they start the climb of Monterme, it could all come back together on the final climb of the day.
Yes, absolutely. No work at all being done by Sébastien Joly to help Kim Kerken get across to this second group out on the road. They'll get onto the wheel of Frank Schleck there. He's got the light blue shorts as champion of Luxembourg, but he is on Team CSC. A little bit different jersey for him today than the other teammates, including his team boss. His captain is Ivan Basso in the green jersey of points leader by event of being second on the first stage of Criterium International, and the actual leader of the points competition is leading the race as well. That's Eric Decker.
Well, Eric Decker, you know, is really one of the top men for the start of the season. He's always ridden well in races like the Criterium, like Milan-San Remo, I have to say. But here, I suppose these conditions, Bob, for a man who is better known as a one-day rider, are a little bit more suited to Eric Decker this afternoon because it's been very cold, around about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but made a lot more difficult, the conditions, because of these weathers.
Absolutely miserable racing conditions for the riders today. You can see the moisture on the road been falling down consistently throughout the weekend, and very small, narrow roads, very rough pavement as well. Tough place to earn a living and race bicycles.
Well, we're looking now at a race situation where there are 4 leaders, Decker, Basso, Botcherov and Juan Carlos Dominguez. They are being chased at 25 seconds now by a group which has swelled in numbers to around about 10 chasers. At one stage it was only 4 riders chasing. That's Astroloa on the front. But I have to say it could all very much come back down together in the final kilometres of the race. Welcome back to Cyclism Sundays here on OLN. We're still on stage 2 of the Criterium International, and it's still anybody's race. But if we have a look at the race over the last couple of years, it's been very much dominated by Team CSC, with Bobby Julich and Jens Voigt winning last 2 seasons. And of course, if you look a little bit further back, Jens Voigt was the winner back in 1999, and of course Bobby Julich was the winner back in 1998. And currently Ivan Basso is looking very good because he finished second on the opening day stage. Well, Team CSC have literally dominated the last 2 seasons' spring campaigns, and Bob takes a little bit of a closer look at the tough CSC squad.
The Danish-based Team CSC was the top-ranked cycling squad on the Pro Tour calendar in 2005. Managed by 1996 Tour de France champion Bjarne Riis, this talented group is a threat in any race. With a yearly boot camp, the team manager employs a military approach to churn out cycling soldiers, primed for battle on the roads of each contest. CSC have several weapons in the arsenal, with multiple past winners of Criterium International, starting with last year's winner, Bobby Julich, who also won here way back in 1998. The American showcased his form with a prologue win at Paris-Nice 2 weeks ago. Then there's one of the most aggressive and gritty riders in the peloton, German Jens Voigt, who has also won this race twice before in '99 and 2004. Another strong rider is Luxembourg native Frank Schleck. He has been solid recently with the 7th overall at Paris-Nice, and his form was visible last week at Milan-San Remo, where he attacked ferociously on the climbs. Spaniard Carlos Sastre, a climbing specialist, is also a valuable asset as he sacrifices his body pulling team leaders up the climbs. He also tasted victory at the '03 Tour de France with a fantastic stage win on number 13. And let's not forget the biggest star of this team, still in his prime at 28 years of age, Ivan Basso is one of the big favorites to be the next winner of the Tour de France in July. The Italian was second last year and third the year before, and has all the tools necessary to become a multiple winner of the Tour himself. He will also ride the Giro d'Italia as a big favorite coming this May. Meager results so far this year have plagued CSC, but the squad still maintains its reputation as one of the strongest cycling forces in the world, with a legitimate shot at landing on the podium in any race on the calendar, including today's Criterium International.
Well, if the results have been a little bit meager this year, they still can count on their big man, Ivan Basso, who's currently lying second in the overall standings. 15 kilometers to go, the very difficult part of the course here over the summit of the Côte de Mol Malgré Tout, and these riders now are looking at a serious chase. These are the 4 leaders we're looking at, and the gap has just gone from 35 seconds to 44 seconds. This is looking rather good for the 4 leaders on the front. Bocharov, followed by the green jersey of Ivan Basso, followed by Eric Decker, and of course right on the back there, followed by Juan Carlos Dominguez. And I have to say, Bob, you know, that win by Eric Decker yesterday was the first win he's had since 2004. This is a man certainly on the comeback. He's had a lot of bad luck these recent years, especially after breaking his leg in Milan-San Remo, but this season he really is in great form.
Eric Decker there is in the yellow jersey, race leader, had a good result yesterday, winning the stage, beat Basso in the sprint. That's not a huge accomplishment, and it was a little bit of a slow motion sprint there. None of the riders in the breakaway obviously noted for their sprinting ability, but when you have a chance to win a stage, Eric Decker has proven that he has quite a good sprint. He won 3 stages on the gallop in the Tour de France a few years ago, so one of the big stars of cycling. He's had mixed fortunes in recent times, but back on form on stage number 1 and 2 in Criterium International. Great riding by Eric Decker. It's good to see the old dog still being able to run with the pack.
Yeah, he certainly is putting in a great amount of effort. This is the chasing group, but they are, although they look to be seriously under pressure here, they are losing time. The last time check we got was 35 seconds. Now it's gone up to 44 seconds. I think the big advantage that leading group, Bob, has got is there is no concerted chase here because most of the big names are represented. We've got Team CSC represented in that leading group. We've got Team Rabobank, and this morning it's really been the majority of the work done by Team Rabobank. So who's left to chase?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. Liberty Seguros is the only team left to chase. Alberto Contador is in the second group on the road. There's Sebastian Joly tacked onto the back. That's a tactic that the French use quite often, not willing to do the work. and their results are sort of reflected on that. And if you get in a breakaway or a chase situation with one of the French riders, sometimes it's not the best advantage.
Well, we've gone over now the top of Les Hautes Butées, which is the flat part of the course over the top of the summit of the Côte de Mol Malgré Tout. The riders will face a rather tricky descent. Difficult roads in this part of France as well, but the time gap is starting to increase quite sensibly for the leading 4 riders, now 51 seconds. But Bob, this is the sort of race where we get a chance to see the Tour de France contenders for the first time during the season. This race and of course Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and this is a race which in the past has been very much dominated by men who go on to perform well in the Tour de France. Riders like, of course, Bernard Hinault, who won this race on a number of occasions. Stephen Roach won it, and of course the great Miguel Indurain. It is a race that brings together every different facet of the sport.
A great little race on the weekend, a mini Tour de France as it were. 2 stages on day number 2. That's always very tough. Recovery, a big part of success here. Igor Osterloh there, a resurgence for him. He won the Worlds a few years ago and has had some pretty small results in the meantime, but he's starting to ride good again this spring. Here's our breakaway. Here's the front of the race, and Eric Decker seems to be in great form, just toying with these riders in the break, and they're putting time on the chasers. Now it's up to 56 seconds, so a good little breakaway. Probably the strongest riders in the race right here. They're just demolishing the field as they go along.
Well, I have to say, I think if this group stays as it is to the finish, the win of the stage has got to go to Eric Decker, and that would be rather interesting because the man who won this stage last year was Thomas Dekker. Thomas Dekker, just 22 years of age and tipped as being the next great Dutch cyclist, and I have to say that it would be rather interesting when you go back to read the results in the few years' time, because all you will see is Dekker, Dekker, Dekker. I suppose you'd call that a triple Dekker. Anyway, this is Eric Dekker on the front, the oldest of the Dekker trio, and he now is looking very comfortable, and I would have to say he is certainly trying to figure out whether or not he can get himself the win here, because after that he's going to have to defend the overall lead in a 5-mile time trial, a very difficult and violent time trial in the afternoon as well, around the very heart of Charleville-Mézières. Eric Dekker hasn't won a race until yesterday for 2 years, but now certainly looking to me with a 50-second advantage, as if he's getting himself lined up for win number 2.
After every star hangs them up, someone must fill his shoes. The greatest riders in the world are about to collide. One by one, the contenders will emerge. Who will be the next king of cycling? This week, George Hincapie aims to become the first American ever to win the monumental Tour of Flanders. Cyclism Sundays, the clash of the contenders. Tour of Flanders, next Sunday at 5 on OLN, the home of the Tour de France.
Tête de la course, the front end of the bike race. These are the leading 4 riders, and the rain is starting to tumble down a fraction. It really has chilled the riders in the first part of the race, but nobody seems to be suffering from the cold right now, because we're looking at an average speed of around about 45 kilometers an hour. We're just about 10 kilometers to go. That's 6 miles of racing, and that is going to include the very difficult climb up to the summit of the Col Monterme. And Bob, that is a very difficult, violent effort at the start of the year. I'm rather surprised to see Ivan Basso on form so well, because he's got a tough season ahead of him. He's looking at the Giro d'Italia, he's looking at the Tour de France, so to be on form so early on, I wonder if he's taken a page out of the Lance Armstrong How to Win the Tour de France book.
Lance Armstrong second in Criterium International during his 7 wins in a row at the Tour, so using this race to gauge his fitness a little bit, was second on the stage in a breakaway situation yesterday. We thought that would end in a sprint, but a lot of attacking, very aggressive racing. Today, a different story, a lot of climbs out on the race, and Ivan Basso, one of the best in the business at climbing. So steady throughout the year. He led the Giro d'Italia last year, and then he had a big problem over the Gavia Pass and lost incredible amounts of time, I think about 47 minutes on the stage. But he was in form again in the Tour. After the Tour, he went on to win the Tour of Denmark just a few weeks later. So he does believe he can do 2 races at the top of the game. So he's looking to win the double, and we haven't seen the Tour and Giro 1 in a long, long time. I think all the way back to Miguel Indurain when he won the Tour and the Giro in the same season.
As the Criterium National ploughs on, let's not forget Saturday on OLN, the last great race on Earth crosses the finish line. After 1,200 miles of frozen rivers, deadly cliffs, and the most dangerous Alaskan tundra, only one team will be named champion. The Iditarod on OLN, presented by Cabela's, Saturday at 10 p.m.
Jose Ivan Gutierrez is in this group a little bit further back. Sébastien Joly we've seen as we go forward now to the leading group of 4 riders. Now, Bob, hovering at around about the minute mark, the winner has got to come from this leading group of 4. And I've got to say, for me, my pick is going to be Eric Dekker, so I'll give you your pick now.
If you're going to take Dekker, I'll have to take Basso. It finishes on a climb, and we've seen Basso win at the top of mountains before. I can think back to the Tour de France a couple of years ago when he had a big sprint with Lance Armstrong to La Mongie and won the sprint there. So I'll have to stick with Ivan Basso, the man in the green jersey, who, however, races for Team CSC.
Well, Eric Dekker now must be thinking about how is he going to win this race. He got the win yesterday ahead of Ivan Basso, who's in the leading breakaway with him now, and we're thinking, probably in the back of our minds, what is this last climb of the race going to be like? Well, the climb up to Monterme is a rather difficult little climb. It climbs up to 346 meters in altitude. It's 5 kilometers in length, and it tips out at 1 or 2 points at an average of 10%, but the average gradient, Bob, is only 7% in climbing. But it is, at the start of the year, all about the effort over a gradient like that, and especially as it's at the end of the race.
And a very cold, miserable day of racing it is. Bocharov there talking a little bit with Dekker. Dekker saying, I'm going back to the team car, drop off my arm warmer, so I won't be taking any pulls at the front for a moment, and a little bit of a gap to the 2 riders, Gutierrez as well as Basso in front. Bocharov closing that gap now. Eric Dekker shaking the legs out a little bit too, making every possible preparation for the last climb of the day to the stage finish in Monterme.
This is the second group, and they're now stretching to the 1 minute advantage. And you can see there is no real organization in this group. Alberto Contador is in this group, as well as Kim Kierken, who we mentioned on a couple of occasions. And they will be very worried, I would say, at this time gap, which is now stretched out to 1 minute and 5 seconds. In this group, we have mentioned Igor Astarloa in the red jersey. He's riding exceptionally well for Team Bala World, a team which originates originally, I have to say, from South Africa, but now, Bob, has become a very serious international squad.
Barlow World, with the acquisition of Astarloa, they put a lot of money into him, and he's having some very good results so far this year. It's been a couple of years getting started. That's pretty normal, though, for a new team to go to Europe, be based in Belgium, and try to do all these very tough races. But Igor Astarloa doing a great job so far this year, and he's there in the red jersey, just about 5 riders back from the front.
The two riders in this group from the Ques d'España Il Baleares team are, of course, Jose Ivan Gutierrez, who's the man who might take out the sprint, but I think they're going to be sprinting for 5th place the way this race is developing. And, of course, Constantino Zabaya, who was very early on in one of the moves that set this race on fire as we go back to join the leading group of 4 riders. Bob, Eric Decker looks very comfortable there, but he's keeping a close eye on Alexander Bocharov. He was second earlier on this season in the Tour of the Mediterranean. Now, he could be the man to create the surprise because he's a very good little climber, the Russian.
The Russian rider, very good climber, also has a pretty mean sprint, so watch for Bocharov there to do good on this stage as well. All 4 men have been contributing to the pacemaking so far, and that's why the gap continues to increase. Now 1 minute and 9 seconds, and not a very well organized chase from behind.
Juan Carlos Dominguez is the man they have to think about on the back. You know, he hasn't won a race either for a number of seasons, but he is a very good finisher and a very good individual time trialist. As they take the risks on the descent, once they get to the bottom, they will be then starting the climb up to the finish in the Col de Monte Terme. Well, as we start here, the climb, the final climb of the day to Col Monterme. This on the front is Ivan Basso. On his shoulder there, Eric Decker looking very comfortable and competent. I have to say, we've just seen a very brave move there by Juan Carlos Dominguez in 4th position. And, of course, right there in 3rd position, Alexander Bocharov. This is the chase group, and they've actually pulled it back a fraction, but I don't think enough. 49 seconds to the chasers. Bob, will they come back, or will the winner come from the leading group of 4?
Well, when you see how strong the breakaway riders are, Bocharov, Basso, and Decker, as well as Dominguez, is going to be very tough. A lot of work having to be done in the chase groups if they're going to come back. The problem is a little bit discouraging because there's a couple of very strong riders in the chase group that are on teams of riders up in the front, especially Frank Schleck there, the champion of Luxembourg from Team CSC. He won't have to do any work at all because Ivan Basso is in the front. He can just sit on, and he might have the fastest finish of anybody in this group. So when you're working to try to pull back the breakaway, it's very discouraging when you have a teammate like Frank Schleck. And here come the attacks that are going off now. Looks like the first man is Alexander Bocharov.
Alexander Bocharov is a very good climber, 2nd overall in the Tour of the Mediterranean. Look at the problem. There's a problem here for Eric Decker. Eric Decker, Bob, seemed to have a little bit of a mechanical problem there. I can't see what it is. I'm not sure if it was a leg problem or a mechanical problem, but he seems to be slowing down.
He took a look at his bicycle, pulled over immediately. We'll see if he needs to get a change on the bike. It might have just been his legs had a mechanical, though, because it doesn't seem like the machine is having any trouble at all. But Eric Decker, he is having trouble.
Well, he's having trouble, certainly, and he's lost the chance, and he could very well lose the overall lead here. This is Juan Carlos Dominguez. He's 3rd place on the road as we speak, and a little bit further off, obviously, you can see Ivan Basso has responded there to the move, which came from Alexander Bocharov. Juan Carlos Dominguez, watch out for him this afternoon, Bob, because he's a very good individual time trialist. A couple of years ago, in 2002, he actually won himself the prologue of the Giro d'Italia, but that happened to be in Groningen, Holland at the time.
That's right, the Giro d'Italia. He won the prologue in that, and I think it was the fastest average speed ever recorded in a time trial. Juan Carlos Dominguez. Here is Eric Decker. He seems to get his momentum back a little bit, but he's losing time now to the 3 riders in front. It was Bocharov who attacked first, and the only man able to respond was Ivan Basso. Ivan Basso has gone past Bocharov now and is flying up this last climb, and Dominguez and Decker both dropped.
Well, I tell you what, he's stamping out the pace here with certain authority. I'm not sure whether or not this man we're looking at here, Eric Decker, did have a mechanical, Bob, because he doesn't seem to be too bad. And this is Botcherov now coming across. He's going to set the pace, making for a fraction with Ivan Basso. These two leaders have around about a 10-second advantage over Juan Carlos Dominguez, who actually does seem to be coming back. But the man who's been caught out in the crossfire is Eric Decker.
Eric Decker was shaking his legs with his pedal, with his foot out of the pedal earlier on the descent before the last climb. So maybe a little bit of cramping coming into the legs of Eric Decker, and that is a shame, riding so well so far in Criterium International.
That's right, Bob. I remember seeing that little move. That could have been a little bit of cramp because of the cold weather at the start of the season. Ivan Basso here, I wonder if he's starting the season off just a little bit too early. We know that Lance Armstrong has always performed well in the early part of the season whenever he went on to win the Tour de France. He's performed well here at the Criterium International, and he used to always do very well in the Amstel Gold Race. But Ivan Basso is taking a slightly bigger chunk of racing to the Tour de France than Lance Armstrong will, because he wants to ride the Giro d'Italia as well.
It's always a little bit tricky to decide what races in preparation you should do for the Tour. Ivan Basso believing that he can do a good Giro d'Italia as well as win the Tour. And today he is really riding well, having dropped the whole field. He's on the last climb of the day, and he has dominated this bike race so far. Alexander Botcharov, the only man who could get on his wheel, and he is really suffering there. You can see on the face of Botcharov, he's really struggling to stay on the wheel of Ivan Basso.
So as we get closer to the finish, we'll take a short break and come back with a lot more.
Cyclism Sunday's coverage of the Criterium International on OLN is brought to you by TIAA CREF, financial services for the greater good.
As we go around about 10 seconds further back to Eric Decker. Eric Decker, a few moments ago, Bob, must have been thinking, I can win this race, I can win the time trial. A little bit of advice coming in through the headphones there from the team manager. Don't panic. Just make sure you don't lose too much time. And there is Juan Carlos Dominguez. To me, it looks as if that Spanish rider is starting to come back. And that's why you can see Ivan Basso swinging off. He's looking for some help.
A little bit of help from Botcharov there. Basso's so strong that Botcharov can barely get past him to take a turn at the front. And Juan Carlos Dominguez clawing his way back. And there is the red kite with 1 kilometer to go.
Well, that's 1 kilometer to go. Basso calmly looking over his shoulder there to see what the position is of Juan Carlos Dominguez. Hasn't won a race since September of last year, and that was a stage, that was, I would say, the Tour of Emilia. He's now got himself into second place, but look how quickly there you can see Juan Carlos Dominguez is coming back. This could be a bit of a surprise. Eric Decker is at 17 seconds, and the fact that they're letting the cars pass there, Bob, indicates that the race referees don't think Decker is coming back into this race. Well, there you go. They've gone inside the Flamme Rouge, the red kite, and Juan Carlos Dominguez, Bob, is back.
Clawing his way back into the lead group there. It'll be 2 riders plus 1 more. Dominguez barely getting on the wheel when Basso makes an acceleration. Basso has the advantage of probably the best legs of anybody in this group. He can look back and see Dominguez trying to get back, and he's gone right to the front and is making some tempo with just a few hundred meters before the finish line.
Won a couple of stages in the Giro d'Italia last year, and he was the man who was able to stay with Lance Armstrong on a most regular basis during last year's Tour de France. He looks good. Botcharov, I don't think, has got the acceleration here, although he is now taking up second place. Eric Decker fighting back. Decker is a fighter. He's not the sort of man to give up a race like this, and Juan Carlos Dominguez is just getting back onto the tail. They will be very shortly looking to see 500 meters to go, so we now, Bob, at 500 meters to go, have a 3-man leading group.
Well, Eric Decker seeming to recover from whatever problem he was having, and now is sprinting, trying to get across to the 3 men in front. Dominguez was dropped when Decker opened up that gap, and Dominguez has fought his way back also, and it's Basso and Botcharov at the front of the bike race. Ivan Basso having a great day out on the roads of this stage of the Criterium International and starting off his season quite well.
Actually, this little bit of movement, this tactical dodging around left and right here could be good for Eric Decker, who was at 20 seconds. Now he's at 17 seconds. I don't think he's going to come back, but he will reduce his losses somewhat. Everybody now content to sit on the wheel of Ivan Basso. Now then, this is Botcharov in second place, Juan Carlos Dominguez in third place. Now you can see the acceleration starting to come. Basso on the front here. There's the finish line. It's a long straight. He may well be making it too long. Right in second position. Ideal position for Alexander Botcharov if he's got the move now, but taking it up, winding it up nice and slowly. We don't normally see the move coming from Ivan Basso, but Basso is there. Sorry about the picture breakup, but Basso's going to take this one right on the line. He throws the bike, gets first place there, ahead of Alexander Botcharov. Third will go to Juan Carlos Dominguez, and what's important now is the clock for Eric Decker. Eric Decker will not slow down. He will accelerate right the way up to the finish. He's lost himself a little bit of time here this afternoon. Look at the clock, 15 seconds for Eric Decker. He will lose the overall lead, and the winner, Bob, well, it's early on in the season, but #1 slot goes to Ivan Basso.
What a great sprint Basso just did there. He led out for about the last 400 meters, accelerating all the way to the line. Bacharov and Dominguez, impossible to come around, and a great little sprint by Ivan Basso at the top of this climb.
So the results brought to us by TIAA Kref. The win there going to Ivan Basso ahead of Alexander Bocharov and Juan Carlos Dominguez. Losing 15 seconds, Eric Decker across the line in 4th place, and over a minute behind there, Alexander Moose was 5th. Jérôme Pinot of France was 6th, Frank Schleck was 7th, and Jose Ivan Gutierrez 8th. But finishing outside the time limit, Bobby Julich, and of course not finishing the stage, Floyd Landis, because of his crash of yesterday. A tough weekend for the two American riders, Landis and Julich, but a very great weekend for Ivan Basso, getting himself win #1 and, of course, a new yellow jersey at the top end of the overall classification. He now leads the Criterium International by 11 seconds from Eric Decker, 1 minute and 6 seconds back to Andrei Grivko, and Igor Astroloa, the former world champion from Spain. He is in 4th place. Constantino Zabaya from Case d'Epargne Il Baleares makes up the top 5. And looking a little bit further down, you can see Peter Wiening is a good man to have up there in 7th place from Team Rabobank. Ronnie Schultz in 8th, and making up the top 10, Alexander Bocharov. And he is 1 minute and 39 seconds in arrears. Well, there's plenty more racing to come here at the Criterium International. Coming up next, the Stage 3 individual time trial.
After every star hangs them up, someone must fill his shoes. The greatest riders in the world are about to collide. One by one, the contenders will emerge. Who will be the next king of cycling? This week, George Hincapie aims to become the first American ever to win the monumental Tour of Flanders. Cyclism Sundays, the clash of the contenders. Tour of Flanders, next Sunday at 5 on OLN, the home of the Tour de France.
Welcome back to Stage 3 here on OLN, and it's our coverage of the 75th edition of the Criterium International on Cyclism Sundays. I'm Paul Sherwen, as always, joined by Bob Roll. Well, yesterday we saw the win on the 192-kilometre flat stage going to Eric Decker of Holland, just ahead of Ivan Basso. Well, the tables were turned this morning, because in the 101-kilometre mountain stage, it was Ivan Basso crossing the line in 1st place and, of course, taking the overall lead. But this afternoon in Charleville-Mézières, the riders line up for an 8.3-kilometre individual time trial, the Race of Truth, at the end of which we will know who is going to be the overall winner. But, Bob, it's this individual time trial, really, where the race really counts.
5 miles, 8.7 kilometers, the Race of Truth. And we will see who's going to win the overall title at this year's Criterium International. See the riders in Charleville-Mézières, right down there, starting and finishing in the same town. A little bit of a false flat. You couldn't really call it a climb, but we will get the intermediate checks right there. 8.3 kilometers at the finish.
Well, 8.3 kilometers is 5.1 miles, and just out of interest, that's the length of the Mackinac Bridge in Michigan, which links together the two Michigan peninsulas. The highest point of the race, only 191 meters or 600 feet. And last year, the winner just happened to be an American. It was Bobby Julich in a time of 10 minutes and 5 seconds. Well, down here to the action at 8.3 kilometres or around about 5 miles of this individual time trial. The overall leader as we speak is Andrei Kushekin, 10:18.06, and that's shades, isn't it, a little bit of Paris-Nice a couple of weeks ago. Jens Voigt is right up there, a second adrift in 2nd place, and Alberto Contador, who posted the early fast time at the time checks, is in 3rd place in a time of 10:22. But all of the big names are stacked up right at the very end. Ivan Basso will be the last man to start. He will start just after Eric Decker. Andrei Grivko will start 3 from the end, and former world champion Igor Astroloa will start 4 riders from the end. This is rather a good move here by Thomas Löfqvist, but I have to say, Bob, I don't think he's going to set the world on fire with this ride.
Thomas Löfqvist, the Française de Joux rider from Sweden, falling away 11th place there. Andrei Kushekin still leading the time trial. Great ride by the Kazakh rider on the Liberty Seguro squad. He's come over with his teammate Alexander Vinokurov. They have 3 riders from Kazakhstan on the Spanish squad, Liberty Seguros. Good ride by Lofkis, but he won't challenge the time of our current leader, Andrei Kashekin.
Well, Lofkis, a young rider for the future, just 21 years of age. That's the very heart of Charleville-Mézières, a very magnificent town square as we go out onto the course. And 1 or 2 riders are posting some very interesting times. This is Bernard Cole, and he will be looking to try and dethrone the time which has been set very early on once again by Andrei Kashekin. There are people, Bob, who think that one day Andrei Kashekin will win the Tour de France.
I would have to say that those people are a bit misinformed, but you never know. You never can tell. He is a good bike racer. Nearly won the prologue of Paris-Nice just a couple of weeks ago, and Bobby Julich, the only man who was able to beat his time, he had to sit there at the finish line waiting for the whole field to go by, and it was the last man out on the road, and that was Bobby Julich that passed Kashekin by less than 1 second just a couple of weeks ago. Alexander Moose now in the starting house. He's on the Phonak team. Good time trialist, and he'll like to do a good time here. He's had some good results. He's done a lot of work for Floyd Landis in the early season, doing all kinds of tempo in the Tour of California and Paris-Nice, helping Floyd Landis win those 2 stage races. So a great start of the season to Phonak, and Floyd Landis currently leading the Pro Tour standings.
Bernard Cole looks to be suffering a little bit. This climb is rather interesting. In fact, the race is 8.3 kilometers, halfway around. I wouldn't actually call this a climb, Bob, would you? This is more of a false flat, but it's just enough to upset the rhythm of the rider who's trying to dose his effort over this very difficult 10-minute race.
You can see the big chainring in the front, and that's the biggest gear the riders can have. And then across the sprocket in the back, close to the wheel, close to the disc wheel though. So a bit of a tough climb, false flat in the drops. And Bernard Cole trying to get to the finish line. He started the day in the top 20, but almost 3 minutes behind our current leader, Ivan Basso. Ivan Basso has done a lot to try to improve his time trialing over the years, including working with some physiotherapists to correct some muscle imbalances. So his agility and time trialing skills should be absolutely fantastic. And today we'll get a first chance to see how Ivan Basso is going to do in the big races to come, the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. He needs to do a good time trial to give his team and himself some morale for the rest of the year.
They looked very comfortable this morning, but I have to say so too did Eric Decker. Eric Decker is going to start the penultimate position in this individual time trial. Only 11 seconds adrift. This race could go to either of those 2 riders. We look here onto the shoulders of Bernard Cole, who seems to be suffering quite a bit in this individual time trial. As we wait, we've still got an awful lot more of the big names to come. Welcome back, Gianpaolo Caruso. The little yellow jersey you can see there is his position in the yellow jersey race. He's placed 15th overall at 2 minutes and 41 seconds. And Bob, it's quite interesting to see that even teams like Liberty Seguros are now bringing a lot of riders from Italy and France onto their squad.
Gianpaolo Caruso in the break in the morning stage, the second group out on the road, chasing the breakaway of 4 riders. Caruso, good little cyclist, and such an international sport now that all the teams in the Pro Tour, the top 20 teams in the world, have riders from all over the world.
Well, Caruso's best ever performance, and only performance I can remember, was when he finished 4th overall in the Tour Down Under. That was when he rode for Team Once back in 2003, and he's a rider who I think is one of the development riders from Liberty Seguros. He's 25 years of age, and as you can see here, he's getting out onto the course. It is a difficult course. The man who leads at the moment, Andrei Kashekin, with a time of 10 minutes and 18 seconds, with a 1 second lead over Jens Voigt and Alberto Contador, who was very aggressive this morning. He is currently lying in 3rd place. This is Jérôme Pinault of Bouygues Telecom. He's pretty well up in the overall classification as well. But I think, Bob, the win is going to come from one of the last 3 riders to start. And I have to say, really, one of the last 2, because it has to go between Ivan Basso and Eric Decker.
Eric Decker, a very good time trialist. He won Tirreno Adriatico, the last stage, a few years ago, during his glory years of cycling on the time trial. And Ivan Basso has taken huge strides to correct his time trialing and become one of the best stars. He's realized that if you're going to win a Grand Tour, not only do you have to be a good climber, be able to recover, but you also have to do this very specialized discipline of cycling, and that's the individual effort of the time trial. You see the riders bent over the machine, as narrow and aerodynamic as they possibly can be, and try to make as much tempo and go as fast as possibly in the time trial. And Ivan Basso has made a huge effort in the wind tunnel in the off-season, as well as out on the roads every day using the time trial machine. So Ivan Basso needs to do a good time a little bit later. He's going to start last man as race leader.
As the riders here at the Criterium International suffer on their own, this week on Survivor Wednesdays, it's the final 3 episodes of Pearl Island. Who will make the final 4 and go on to win it all in the finale? And after, contestants tell all at the reunion show. Survivor Wednesdays, final episodes and the reunion show beginning at 7. Here we're actually looking at Gianpaolo Caruso. The most important thing is Ivan Basso, Eric Decker. That's the big battle here this afternoon. A few years ago, I would have said that Ivan Basso was the weaker rider of the two in the individual time trial. But you're right, Bob. He's invested a lot of time and money into improving what he always regarded as his Achilles heel. And over the last couple of years, to finish high up in the Tour de France, he has had to improve the time trialing position. The only thing that might go against him, really, is we're very early on in the start of the season. Eric Decker is a man for the classics, and there's only 11 seconds. So in an effort of 10 minutes, Decker might have the advantage, although purely as an individual time trialist, I have to say Basso is the better man. If we're looking down here at Caruso, you get a chance to see the weather has improved a fraction here in the afternoon, hasn't it? Because this morning the weather was atrocious. Low clouds, cold weather, 44 degrees Fahrenheit. That chilled a lot of the riders. It's also very difficult, isn't it, Bob, on a day like today, because 2 stages in one day. And of course, in Europe last night, the clocks were changed, so the riders also got an hour's less sleep than normal.
Insult to injury. Very tough to do 2 stages on a single day. And when the weather is not so good either, it makes it very tough for the riders. No rest for the wicked, as they say. Gianpaolo Caruso in the second group out on the road at the start of the stage in the morning. And here we see Jerome Pino. He is on the Bouygues Telecom. His teammate, Thomas Vogler, the man who had the yellow jersey for so many days a couple of years ago in the Tour.
Poor old Thomas Vogler actually got across to the breakaway this morning, just at the point when the breakaway was brought back into the fold by Team Rabobank, so not having the luck that had him in the yellow jersey a couple of years ago. Well, as we look here at Jerome Pino, you can see the clouds are starting to come. I hope they don't come and bring rain before the end of the afternoon. Well, with all the big names, including the overall leader, Ivan Basso, still to start, we'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to Stage 3 of the Criterium International, an individual time trial of 8.3 kilometers. But before we go back to the action, we're keeping tabs on how the American riders are performing on the international circuit, just as we build up to the Tour de France in July. Floyd Landis has probably started off the season better than anybody else, with wins, of course, in the Tour of California and Paris-Nice, but he didn't finish here in the Criterium International after a very bad crash on the first day. But Bobby Julich, Bob, he also is having a little bit of a rough time.
Stage number 2 for Bobby Julich didn't go as well as he thought it would. He finished outside of the time limit. Defending champion of this stage race, he was unable to finish after after missing the time limit on stage number 2. But his objectives are a little bit further on in the summer, the Giro and, of course, the Tour de France.
Well, Freddie Rodriguez, different kind of rider. He was competing today in the Flèche Brabazon, just in the outskirts of Brussels, and he was seen doing an awful lot of work for his Davitamon Lotto team, keeping him at the front end of the pack.
David Zabriskie, young American on Team CSE, finished the Settimana Ciclistica Internazionale Coppi Bartoli down in Italy after leading after the first stage because of the team time trial. Race leader Dave Zabriskie wound up finishing 104th, but it's always nice to lead any stage race in Europe.
And a man who started the season off well and will be racing next week in the Tour of Flanders, a man of the classics, Georgi Hincapie. He's in good form and he's looking forward to his week in the northern part of Europe.
Soul brother number 1 from Durango, Colorado, little Tommy Danielson. His next race, we'll see him. Tour of Georgia, he's the defending champion. What an exciting race it was last year.
And of course, last but not least, Levi Leipheimer from Team Gerolstein has started the season off well in the Tour of California, but didn't finish last week, the Settimana Ciclista Internacional. And of course, we'll keep close tabs on all of these riders as we get slowly but surely closer to the Tour de France in July. Frank Schleck riding down the ramp here, the current road race champion of Luxembourg, not the time trial champion, but he is out on course as we go along the banks of the river to see Bernard Cole putting in a fairly reasonable time. The little yellow jersey there indicating he's 19th overall, 2 minutes 41 down. So he's not going to create any surprises in this effort, which is only a 10-minute and 20-second effort on rough calculations. The fastest man so far, Andrei Koshekin. But a lot of these riders, Bernard Cole, for example, Bob, are riders who we will see ride a lot better when it comes to races like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but I'm still waiting to see whether or not Eric Decker can dethrone Ivan Basso, because they will be the last two men to start.
T-Mobile squad, he's the teammate of Jan Ulrich. Of course, Ulrich not in Criterium International, saving his legs for later on in the summer. His team manager, Rudy Pevenage, has gone so far as to announce about 10 riders that will do the tour with a one man in reserve there, and it's kind of discouraging if your name is not on that list to carry through that the whole season. But Bernard Cole, he was not on the list, so maybe trying to impress the selectors on T-Mobile for the Tour de France a little bit later in the year in July.
Well, I think that's why Eric Zabel jumped ship as well, because his name wasn't on the Tour de France list last year. It probably wasn't going to be this year, so he decided to move across and ride along Alessandro Petacchi. He's done very well for Alessandro Petacchi so far this season, because he's had himself around about 10 second places. This is the Flamme Rouge, the red kite, and we're looking here at Bernard Cole coming up towards that final 1,000 metres. But I tell you what, next week will be very interesting, won't it, Bob? I always get very excited about the Ronde, as the Belgians like to call it, the Ronde van Vlaanderen, because Alessandro Petacchi will be there trying to get a little bit of revenge over Tom Boonen, who yesterday, in fact, won the Grand Prix E3, which is a great pre-season race, a sort of hors d'oeuvre for the Tour of Flanders, and he didn't wait for the sprint. He took off before the end.
Unbelievably strong. Tom Boonen, the big star of Belgian cycling. Bit of a matinee idol they're calling him in Belgium, and a really great bike racer, obviously, but also he's gone over to a little bit more of marketing of the athletes in cycling, and that's pretty rare to see. But Tom Boonen capable of doing that and capable of winning the Tour of Flanders that he did last year.
Well, this is Bernard Cole looking at the top across the finishing line there of André Kashekin. That's the time to beat, 10 minutes, 18 seconds, 06, as he comes into this final acceleration. It's rather strange, you know, just a year ago we were waiting with excitement to see the arrival of Bobby Julich. But Bobby Julich, although he won Paris-Nice, and after Paris-Nice he told us, Bob, that he hadn't trained. I find it hard to win a race without any training, but Bobby Julich had said that. I think maybe he's right. Maybe he has staggered his preparation this year to be a lot better at the Tour de France. And Bernard Cole here comes up to the line, and he's only just going to scrape inside, I would think, the top 25. So there he is, at 24th place there, losing himself 33 seconds. And Bobby Julich wasn't great, was he, this morning? But I think maybe he will be a lot better when we go to the latter part of the season, because Bobby, I think, now is starting to know his body that little bit more, and he knows that this year has got to be a big year for Ivan Basso and, of course, for Team CSC.
Well, Bobby Julich saying he'd love to lead the Giro d'Italia and get the pink jersey on that. Very few Americans have been able to do that. Bobby Julich would like to also win a stage of the Tour, which he hasn't done so far. And, of course, a stage win in the Tour de France. And wearing the pink jersey, that would be a great bookmark at the end of his career. And it's been a great career so far for Bobby Julich.
It certainly has been a great career. Well, it took George Hincapie a long time before he won a stage of the Tour de France, and most of his tours were dedicated to helping Lance Armstrong win the event on seven separate occasions. We're looking here at Gianpaolo Caruso, the Italian rider on the Atleti Seguros, as we go back to the starting house, and we get a chance now to see one of the Rabobank riders, Peter Wiening, getting himself into the starting gate. Now, if you remember Peter Wiening, Bob, he rode himself a very good Tour de France last year.
Had a thrilling stage win just in front of Andreas Kloden by about the width of a tire, I think. He just barely won that stage, but he did a great ride on that day. He was in the breakaway, was caught by the attacking T-Mobile rider, Andreas Kloden, teammate of Jan Ulrich, and was able to hold him off in the sprint. And Peter Wiening, an interesting story. He was picked by a journalist as a young rider, and years ago as a junior racer, and his dream, he told the journalist, was to win a stage of the Tour. So the journalist thought he would write a book about his career, and the dream came true for Peter Wiening in this just past year's Tour de France by winning a stage.
Well, this is Sébastien Joly coming down to the riverside now and accelerating around. We're still looking at the time to beat of André Kashekin, and we might have to wait till the very end to see if anybody can beat the man from Kazakhstan who started the season off in great form. Well, this is the arrival of Jose Alberto, as you can see, Martinez, and that is a rather big surprise for everybody here on the finish line, Bob, because Martinez from Spain has just put in a new best time.
This is incredible, this rider, not fancied at all. Martinez coming to the line there, Agritubel, one of the smallest teams in all of professional cycling, and he has gotten the better of Andrei Kashekin by 0.8 seconds, by 0.8 tenths of a second. That's a great ride by Martinez on the very small squad. Agritubel, what a ride.
Well, that's an impressive ride there. So we have a brand new leader, 10:08, and that is a 10-second beating of Andrei Kashekin. I find that very hard to believe. But the man from Agritubel, one of the smallest French teams there, creating somewhat of a surprise. The pale blue jersey down there we just caught a glimpse of was Ronnie Schultz out on the course, as now we can see Gianpaolo Caruso, 15th overall at the start of the day, Bob, is inside the last kilometre. That performance there by Martinez really is quite astounding, because this man hasn't had a win since March of last year.
That's a great ride by Martinez, and we'll have to see. Maybe he's a bit of a specialist in March. He is leading by 10 seconds. We got the report on that from Kashekin, who had not been passed, not even by Jens Voigt, throughout the day. So a great ride by Martinez, a bit of a surprise so far. We'll see if Decker and Basso can get anywhere near that. The streets are drying out, the weather is improving, so maybe that was a little bit of advantage that Martinez needed.
Well, Bob, what you're saying is actually quite true. He is a specialist of the month of March and April, because a couple of years ago, in 2001, he finished second overall in the Criterium International, and he actually won the race back in April 2002, so maybe this is his week of racing. Here we are looking at a former world champion. Igor Astroloa rides for Team Barlow World, which has a lot of South African riders on the squad. And I would have to say, he is a man also on a bit of a comeback trail.
He is on a bit of a comeback trail. World champion. Huge things were thought of. Signed the big contract, but then had some very tough years racing for a lot of different squad, and now finding some good legs with the Barlow World squad on the Cannondale bicycles made in the United States of America.
Well, he won the Milan-Torino early on this year in fine form, certainly as we look here at Igor Astroloa. He's already finished 11th in Milan-San Remo. He was in that last-minute breakaway, which got caught just almost inside of the last kilometre. So he too could cause a little bit of a surprise. He's not a great individual time trialist. And we were talking a little bit earlier about a man who won a stage in the Tour de France, Peter Weening. Well, in fact, let's not forget another man who won a stage in the Tour de France is in the Criterium International, Michael Rasmussen. We haven't seen him at all, Bob. He recorded a time of 11 minutes and 51 seconds. That's around a minute 20 off the winning margin.
Well, we saw the most disastrous time trial we've seen in a long time by Rasmussen, the second to last day of the Tour last year. He went from 3rd place overall to 7th on GC. That was a bit of a disaster, and maybe he hasn't worked on it too much during the winter.
Well, as the riders ride roughshod here on the roads of the Criterium International, don't forget Saturday, the top 45 riders take on the most powerful bulls as OLN and the PBR ride into Albuquerque. Don't miss the roughest 8 seconds in sports. The PBR built for tough. Live Saturday at 8 p.m. on OLN. Only 2 riders now will be left to start as Sébastien Joly crosses the line in around about 18th place there, 10:34. 2 riders left to start now. The man who had a little bit of a problem this morning is now wearing the green jersey as the most consistent rider in the race. This is Eric Decker. He has an 11-second deficit to try and make back on Ivan Basso. It's a tall order, Bob, but at the start of the year, strange things can happen.
You never know. Eric Decker, a lot of hard training in the winter, maybe a little bit more specific for the classics early on in the season than a man like Ivan Basso, who's hoping to do good in both the Giro and the Tour de France. Not till May, Basso wants to reach his top form, but Basso already on very good form, having won stage number 2 earlier in the morning. Ivan Basso is going to be a very hard man to beat. I think Team CSC is stinging a little bit throughout the spring. They've only won a few races so far, and they're accustomed to dominating the spring races. So team management saying, look, Ivan, let's do something in Criterium International. You have some decent fitness, some good legs, and if you get in the breakaway, you might be able to win a stage. And he benefited from a problem to Decker, maybe a little bit, and has taken over the leader's jersey. And once this man gets in the leader's jersey, he'd be very hard to displace from that.
Well, you know, they said that this man is the heir apparent to Lance Armstrong's throne. A lot of people would like to see Jan Ullrich win, but this man, over the last few years, Bob, has improved every season to come up and over the last 2 seasons challenge Lance Armstrong in the month of July. And here he starts last off in the Criterium International with a yellow jersey on his shoulders and a very good chance of winning. This is Frank Schleck. He's the champion of Luxembourg, and he's not a bad time trialist too.
Frank Schleck is falling away from the leader's board. He's just right on the wheel of Voigt, his teammate, Kashakin. He's going to come across 4th place so far. Good ride by Frank Schleck, but not nearly enough to challenge the leading time of Martinez. He's about 15 seconds behind at the moment.
Well, Frank Schleck, a good ride by him, really, I'd have to say. One of the riders for the future, and the son of the great Johnny Schleck, who was a teammate, of course, of the great Eddie Merckx of the 1970s. Well, the time is ticking on here in the individual time trial from Charleville-Mézières. We'll take a very short break. Come back soon. This is Igor Astroloa, former world champion here, and I have to say he really is looking rather good. Good acceleration by him. He's looking at the possibility of moving himself up from a lowly 17th place in the overall standings. And Bob, he's looking rather good here in the time trial, but the roads, to me, seem to be getting a little bit damp.
Well, some clouds now up on the climb of the course, and so maybe we'll see this time by Martinez stand for a while. Weather conditions changing, and it's such a small amount of kilometers, and it's funny that you can see just around the course a little bit, you can see Astroloa in the clouds and in the rain, and Eric Decker, this is Peter Wieding, excuse me, coming towards the finish line. He's in the sunshine casting shadows.
Well, Peter Wieding won his first ever race last year in the Tour de France on that road to Gérardmer, where we saw a big attack coming against the superiority of Lance Armstrong, and it was a very closely fought out win against, of course, on that occasion, the man who's having a lot of troubles in the early part of this season, Andreas Kloden, who again has had to undergo surgery, Bob.
He's broken his wrist out on a training ride, so he'll have to take a few weeks off. They're predicting he can start riding the trainer in a few days, but it'll be about 4 to 6 weeks before he can get out on the open roads. So Andreas Kloden, a real mercurial rider. He was right up there in the Tour a couple of years ago and then had to drop out last year. So he's a bit unpredictable, unlike this man right here, Ivan Basso, who is just as steady as you can imagine, year in and year out, progressing towards the top step of the podium of the Tour de France. He was 3rd, 2nd, and now he's looking to win the Tour de France. I'm sure you would love to have that yellow jersey in the month of July.
And from the Colden roads of northern France, the march to the Stanley Cup playoffs is on. Tomorrow, a special pre-game at 7:30, followed by an NHL doubleheader. The Red Wings versus the Blues, then the Kings versus the Canucks. And Tuesday, Anaheim meets Colorado, the NHL on OLN, home of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Well, the challenge is against this man, Eric Decker. This is one of the most experienced riders on the circuit. He has to make up 11 seconds here this afternoon. It's very difficult at the start of the year, but Bob, looking here at the position of Eric Decker, this is the half-distance time check at 3.6 kilometers. Martinez was fastest there by 8 seconds from Igor Astroloa. 10 seconds to Jens Voigt, and at that time, in fact, Andrei Kashakin was 11 seconds in arrears. But this man here, Eric Decker, knows how to use all of his experience. He will have bounced himself back from that little bit of a problem he had this morning. I think it rather was a problem with his legs rather than his machine as we go to the 3rd man to start from the end, 3rd overall, 1 minute and 6 seconds down. All he can hope here is really to defend his podium position, because actually breathing down his neck is the former world champion Igor Astroloa, who started the day just 2 seconds adrift in the overall classification. This is Ronnie Schultz. Ronnie Schultz not going to get the best time here, but not a bad time for Schultz, inside of the top 10. Lost himself around about 15 seconds, but the big guns are out on the course now. Ivan Basso, Eric Decker, Igor Astroloa and Andrei Krivko. Well, with everybody out on the open road now, we'll take one final break, come back with the finish.
Sunday's coverage of the Criterium International on OLN is brought to you by John Hancock Investments and Insurance.
Well, we're looking down here at Igor Astroloa coming into town, and this is a very fast ride by Igor Astroloa. He is looking, Bob, I'd have to say, at trying to snatch away the position of this man, Andrei Krivko. This is one of the young riders of the future. He is a man who I think we'll see an awful lot more of. He was very aggressive on the morning stage, but he just missed out in that final split.
Krivko, good rider here on the Milram squad of Pataki and Zabel. brand new team out on the blocks in international cycling. Pataki barely losing Milano-San Remo to a great breakaway by Filippo Pozzato, the last survivor of a very aggressive Milano-San Remo 1 week ago. Good riding by Grivko, and he'll have his work cut out for him when you see Eric Decker, Ivan Basso, as well as Jose Ivan Gutierrez and Igor Osterloa coming to the finish line.
Well, he's the national time trial champion of Ukraine, so he will be looking to put in a fair performance here this afternoon. Now we're with the last man out on the road, and this is the intermediary time sprint. This is Ivan Basso. Starts the day, the final stage, stage 3 here in the yellow jersey, an 11-second advantage over Eric Decker. These are the right positions that these riders get themselves into. This man, Bob, has invested money and time into improving his time trialing ability, but this out on the course is Gutierrez, and this could be a good performance here. He's just going to go outside. He's very close to the time of Andrei Koshekin, but this indicates, Bob, there's some very fast men still to come. Look at that second time for Jose Gutierrez, 10:14, 5 seconds adrift, and there's still some very fast men to come. The next man in should be Constantino Zabaya. Look at the way he went round this corner, Bob. He was certainly going for the win.
Time trial champion of Spain, Jose Ivan Gutierrez, not quite, just a few seconds slower than our leader Martinez. Here's Eric Decker going through those corners without braking at all, taking some major chances there. But he knows that he can do a good time trial. It's one of his strengths. It's earlier in the year, and he's hoping that Ivan Basso maybe hasn't reached his top form. I would be very surprised if Ivan Basso would want to let this slip away. He's 11 seconds ahead of this man here at the start of the stage, Eric Decker. Let's see, it's going to be a real good battle. And here's Basso further down the race course, and a little bit of a descent, so he's taking a chance to catch his breath as he continues to chase the yellow jersey of Criterium International. CSC has had a lock on this race for the last couple of seasons. I don't think they want to let this one slip away, especially with Ivan Basso. Look at that intermediate time, just 4 seconds slower than Martinez, our leader.
Well, Martinez went through the half-second time check there, the half-point time check at 4:38. Basso just 4 seconds off. That's an indication that he's doing very well, and the fact that Eric Decker is not on that leaderboard would indicate that the winner is going to be Ivan Basso, but it's all about the last section of the course. This man was third at the intermediary time check, just 8 seconds adrift, so he's got a very good chance, I would have to say, of holding on to a podium position. And of course, you can see as he comes up here to the 1 kilometre to go point, this is a man, I would have to say, Bob, who could be very good over the next couple of seasons.
Grivko, just about 900 meters to go to the finish line, still making very good tempo, making good time, trying to get a good position on GC. He's ridden a great Criterium International so far this weekend and just needs to go a few more 100 meters before he gets to the finish line. Here we see Igor Osterloa coming to the line. Good ride at the intermediate check. He's in 4th position now, so he's starting to lose a little bit of his momentum and struggling to get to the finish.
Struggling to get to the finish. You see how he's got that little bit of dark shadow around his face there? That's a big day for many bike riders. They believe that if you don't have a shave on the day of one of the big races, that gives you that little bit more energy. But not a great ride there by Osterloa. Only 18th place for him, coming in 25 seconds adrift. He had hoped, I think, to try and rip away the 3rd place from Andrei Grivko, but that intermediary time check for Grivko, Bob, I would think will be good enough to keep him on the podium. This is a young man who is just 22 years of age, and already he's the national time trial champion, of course, of Ukraine. Well, look at this. This could be interesting. It's still an awful long way to go up to the finishing line. He rides for the Milram team. That's the team of Alessandro Pataki. He's the time trial champion of Ukraine, and he may well have just gone outside the overall leader's time, but that is good enough for 2nd place for Grivko, and that should give him 3rd place overall.
Fantastic ride, just 4 seconds slower than our leader, Jose Alberto Martinez. Great ride by the Spaniard out of nowhere. Very surprising result for Martinez. Here's Eric Decker still out on the course, but a very good, solid ride by Grivko. Probably going to keep his 3rd place position on general classification.
Now, here's the man for the start of the season. I remember a couple of years ago, Eric Decker here won himself 3 stages of the Tour de France, and every one from a different kind of situation. One was from a large group sprint, one was a win on his own, and the next time was from a small breakaway group. He is such a talented rider, and he knows he could win this race for 11 seconds ahead of this man, Ivan Basso. Basso is thinking long-term. He's thinking about the Tour of Italy, thinking about the Tour de France. But, Bob, when you get a win under your belt, that's always good for the rest of the season. And, of course, it's good for for team morale.
Look at the determination on Basso's face. Just a couple of corners go to the finish line. Here comes Eric Decker. Good ride by Decker. He's not going to win the stage, but a very solid ride by Eric Decker to finish off his Criterium International. He won stage number 1, had some trouble this morning in stage number 2, coming to the finish line, starting to fall away a little bit. Top 10, 11th place for Eric Decker on the time trial with one man still to finish, so he might lose one more place on this stage, and he probably won't win the overall.
Well, 11th place there for Eric Decker, 10 minutes and 26 seconds. Now, you can add 11 seconds to that. If you can take 10 seconds away from that, and that is the time that this man needs to finish in. And I don't think that's going to be the state because, Bob, this man looks to me to be going very fast indeed. This is Ivan Basso, and he's looking there at the corner at the end of that straight, and he knows, and it could be the new best time. This could be remarkable because the Achilles heel of Ivan Basso over the last few years has been the individual time trial. Well, that seems to improve. Look at that face. This could be the face of the Tour de France winner. He's just gone outside of Grivko there. That, though, is impressive because Ivan Basso has just got himself second place in the individual time trial, and he's assured himself of the overall victory here, Bob, but he lost out the stage by 1.19 of a second.
I don't think that'll bother him too much. Basso coming to the finish line after a very good time trial. He won the stage this morning, continues that momentum, and he will win Criterium International. Taking time out of second place, Eric Decker. Great ride by Ivan Basso. He's determined to improve his time trialing, and today is a great result for him and Team CSC.
Well, Bob, did you see that smile on his face? Although he didn't win the stage overall, I think he was very happy to get himself up there because the man who beat him, Dominguez, is a very good individual time trialist. In fact, Dominguez has won a couple of time trials most recently. As we look down there on the crowd in the very heart of Charleville-Mézières, that is an indication, I have to say, of who is going to be the next big man at the Tour de France this year. Let's not forget, of course, Jan Ullrich next month will be making his entry into competition in the Circuit of the Sarthe, and that's a race in the past that Lance Armstrong has used. But the winner of this individual time trial is this man who went out very fast indeed, a former winner of the Criterium International, Jose Alberto Martinez. But probably the best indicator for the rest of the season is the ride by Ivan Basso.
Well, Jan Ullrich will have to take note of the results of Ivan Basso, and that might send a shiver right straight down the big German spine. Ivan Basso on good form, did a solid time trial, dominated the mountain stage, and has now won himself Criterium International. Reversing some of the flagging fortunes of Team CSC, Ivan Basso stepped up. He had the form, he had the power, the fitness, and the luck, and he did a great time trial, which is down to him and him alone, and a good result for Team CSC and Ivan Basso. And that'll give him a lot of good morale for the rest of the year.
And of course, Andrei Koshekin rode very well in the early part of the time trial as well, led as he did in the Paris-Nice prologue, and he's a man who later on in the season will be counted very much upon by his Kazakhstan teammate Alexander Vinokurov when we go to races, of course, like the Tour de France. So here's confirmation of the Stage 3 result brought to us by TIAA Cref. Jose Alberto Martinez did get himself the win by just over a second ahead of Ivan Basso. Andrei Grivko of Ukraine was third, Jose Ivan Guterres was fourth, and the early leader, Andrei Koshekin, crossed the line eventually to stop the clock for fifth. The man we expected to ride well in the overall classification, Jens Voigt, was eventually sixth, just ahead of his own teammate Frank Schleck. Alberto Contador, one of the aggressors of the morning stage, finished in 8th place, and rounding up the top 10, Jérôme Pinault of France was 10th. Well, here is the winner of the stage, Bob. What a bit of a surprise here because he hasn't done very much at all this season, but Jose Alberto Martinez getting himself the win.
Jose Alberto Martinez from a very small Agri-2 squad, and that is a huge result for this team. They don't have a huge budget, but they have come up with a stage win here in Criterium International, a very competitive race with one of the biggest stars in cycling winning the overall, but not the last stage. Ivan Basso, the man in the yellow jersey at the start of the stage, did a good ride, but not quite fast enough to pass this man, Jose Alberto Martinez. He won Criterium International a couple years ago, but now he's won the time trial. Good ride, and very surprising for us. We barely saw him out on the course, and just coming into the finishing straightaway, we could see that he had a faster time than Andrei Koshekin going, and he, sure enough, had 10 seconds faster than Koshekin, and just over 1 second to beat Ivan Basso for the stage win.
Well, just 30 years of age, it was a very well-timed effort to just getting inside the time of Ivan Basso, just by 2 seconds, but that was well judged over the whole distance, 8.3 kilometers. Nice win for Spain. So with a great ride in the individual time trial there, Ivan Basso goes out the overall winner of the Criterium International here, just ahead of Eric Decker, who could only manage 12th in the individual time trial. Andrei Grivko completed the podium in 3rd place, and Jose Ivan Gutierrez was 4th. Ronnie Schultz, by the way, did a very good ride in the morning stage and the afternoon time trial to finish it off in 5th. Looking a little bit further down, Igor Astroloa from Spain, the former world champion, was 6th. Constantino Zabaya was 7th. Another Spaniard in the top 10 in 9th place, Juan Carlos Dominguez. And of course, making up the top 10, the Russian rider there, Alexander Bocharov, was a member of that 4-man breakaway in the morning. Well, the next man to come up onto the podium is a man we expect to see a lot of in the month of July. We didn't really expect him here in the month of March. There he is, Ivan Basso. And I have to say, Bob, looking very calm and collected and rather happy at the start of the season.
Team CSC's won this race in the last 2 years with Voigt and Julik, and now it's Ivan Basso's turn. Great result for Ivan Basso. We didn't think that he would be up here and racing quite so well this early in the year, considering his objectives further on, the judo and the tour. But Ivan Basso saw the opportunity, had some good legs. Eric Decker was leading at the start of the morning, but Ivan Basso just too strong in the hills and in the time trial, and he is going to win Criterium International to carry on now a 3-year streak for Team CSC.
Certainly becoming a tradition the start of the season for Team CSC. That's Bernard Hinault just over on the left-hand side, himself a former winner of the Criterium International. And there is a big smile. It's always good to get a win under the belt in the early part of the season. I have to say this man now is on track to challenge Jan Ullrich and become the new heir to Lance Armstrong's throne at the Tour de France. It's going to be a great month of July. And I think with this man's time trialing ability there, Bob, just 2 seconds adrift from Grivko. Martinez, I should say. Martinez, who is a very good individual and time trialist himself. I would say that bodes well for his time trialing ability when we go through to the Tour de France.
So much work being done by Ivan Basso and his team to improve his time trialing, and now we can see the results of that in the wind tunnel and with the physiotherapist to cure up a few problems that he had with musculature and the balance, and Ivan Basso looking very solid in today's time trial. Great ride by Basso, and he'll have a lot of good morale as the season progresses with this result right here today in Criterium International.
Well, that just about wraps it up from France and the Criterium International. But don't forget, next Sunday, OLN will be in Belgium for the Tour of Flanders. And we will see the world champion, Tom Boonen, racing to try and make it 2 Tour of Flanders in a row. Or will he get beaten to the line by Georgie Hincapie, the big American rider from the Carolinas? Famous for its steep cobblestone hills, don't miss one of the toughest and most prestigious races on the calendar, Cyclism Sundays on OLN, next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific. And if you want to see our complete schedule, don't forget to log on to our website at olntv.com. Congratulations this afternoon to Ivan Basso, early in the season for him, but it was a great win and a good ride in the individual time trial as well. Coming up next on OLN, it's our strongman competition. So on behalf of Bob Roll, I'm Paul Sherwen saying, see you next week in Belgium.
It's time for movies on demand, like having a theater at your command. Hundreds of flicks from A to Z. With Comcast, see them totally free.
Watch them from your couch.
Or in your bed.
And you can eat popcorn out of my head.
Free movies on demand. Anytime you want, no need to plan. Free movies on demand.
Watch hundreds of movies free with On Demand from Comcast Digital Cable.
It's Comcastic.